Morning, everyone. Turn that down a little bit. Here we go. Good morning, everyone. Hey, I can't see the live chat for some reason. I'm surprised. I can't see the chat. But anyway, hey, we're going to continue as it is. Not sure why that is. So, welcome to Not Church. No dogma, no doctrine, no abuse, no abuse, no spiritual abuse, no self, mysticism. I'm Reverend Peter Panagore, teaching 21st century spirituality, myth, metaphor, and mysticism in an age of science and of really great change. Big change. Big change now is here and big change coming. I'm a 2-time near-death experiencer, lifelong mystic, channeling peace as an energy healer of peace, teaching you to find your kingdom of heaven within. Today, the secret of the Satan and how to destroy him or her. Thanks for subscribing and liking this video. I appreciate that. I hope that you're out there and you can hear me. And if you click a like, if someone clicks a like, I'll know you're there. For some crazy reason, I can't see the live chat. Live chat's enabled. Not sure why I can't see you. I'm going to try that again. I'm going to put that back up there. Live chat, enable. Save that. Let's see. There you are. Hey, everybody. I couldn't see you before. Now I do. Thanks. Super. All right. So let's continue with what we were doing now that I've got that figured out. I'm going to pop my hat on too. All right. Now I'm much more comfortable. All right. So here we go. All right. So today, as I said, the secret of the Satan and how to destroy him or her. The secret of the Satan. Thanks for subscribing to this video and liking it. Go to peterpanagore.love if you want to book an appointment with me to have a conversation, some counseling, or some coaching. I'm there, right here in my studio for you. Thanks for being here today and for watching live or watching recorded. Anyway, let's begin with 6 breaths together using the Om, and then 3 listening for silence. Where 2 or more are gathered, said Jesus, I am there. When we gather together, when we practice together, we multiply the presence of the divine between us, among us, and within us. So open the chamber of your heart. Go inside. That's what he said. Go into your closet to pray. Let's go inside the chamber of our hearts today and to pray there. And so the 3 ohms. We're going to resonate our chests, then we're going to resonate our throats and resonate our jaws, driving it right up to our third eye, something like this. And you don't need to do this in public. I am doing it in public. Get a little drink of water there to lubricate the throat. Any of you who are yogis or yoginis, you've done this before in your yoga studios and classes. Do it the way that you know how, at your own pace. And then when we're done with the Om, we're going to then take 3 contemplative meditative breaths using your prayer word, centering prayer. It's also called using your prayer word, your mantra on your breath, down behind your belly button, and up to your third eye. So, y'all ready? Okay, here we go. Together. If ever during this video you feel the presence itself, is self, the buzz, the vibe, the frequency of our shared time together, of the divine presence among us, then let me know in the comments below to see whether this is working or not. I believe it is. It feels that way to me. So next Sunday is the Protestant and Catholic Easter Sunday. And I'll see you for Not Church right here at 10 a.m. Eastern, but Mystic Tea Salon on Easter will be closed so I can spend some time with my family. But we'll be back at the salon the following week. Today is Palm Sunday for the Protestants and the Catholics, not for the Orthodox yet. That comes later in April. But today it's Palm Sunday for the Catholics and the Orthodox, for those traditions. And you know the story. Jesus rides triumphantly into Jerusalem, followed by a week of torture and death. So, how did he handle his suffering? You all know this story, right? Think back to it. Think of a film you saw. Think of the stories you heard in church. A real human being with real flesh and bones, whipped, beaten, crowned, nailed, stabbed, and left to hang for death. This is an epitome of suffering. It's not the only kind of suffering, but it's a pretty bad form of suffering. So yesterday on Facebook, I encountered a debate that I kind of started about how we manifest our own suffering or don't manifest our suffering. I inadvertently started this conversation. Now, some in this chain claimed that we cause or attract our suffering. We plan it ahead. But that's pretty tough to swallow when you've lost a child. That was what the situation was. One mother jumped in and said, "How can our God be loving? How can God be loving? It sure doesn't feel that way to me with such horrid suffering." So just think about the loss of a child for a second. She asked that question after I answered a question of how does the source of all being know the details of our lives for our life review? And I gave this answer. I gave the answer that the divine sees through us, knows us, and understands us, experiences the world through our fingertips, experiences the world through our sight and our hearing, through our relationships, that the divine experiences not just human experience, but all experience. The hawk, the eagle, the dolphin, the chimpanzee, the daisy, the microbe. Not just here on Earth, but across the universe and all of our galaxies and all of the sentient beings, who many of whom are far more advanced than we are. The divine sees the universe through us, experiences the universe through us. This is what namaste is, sisters and brothers. When I say namaste, the God in me sees the God in you, that's God seeing God self in us. the light sees itself. The divine experiences my suffering with me. Elie Wiesel, in the book Night, where he describes his time in the concentration camp under the Nazis, he describes this period, this day, when he stood in line where the Nazis made the camp victims watch executions. It was a matter of control. And somebody, maybe it was the rabbi, said, "Where is God?" as he watched this great suffering in front of him. And somebody said, up there hanging. The divine suffers with us, through us, in us, and experiences the world in our presence. Think of unlimited nature. Hard to do. Hard to do. Unlimited nature wanting to feel limitedness. We are the eyes, ears, and fingertips of the divine in the world. So in my life review, I was seeing what was recorded in heaven. Some call it the aesthetic record, or some call it the book of life. You could call it the data bank. You could call it whatever you want to call it. But the divine self showed me my life because the divine had experienced it with me. This was not a good answer for the grieving mother. She was not happy with that. In reply, the grieving mother said, "Why does God suffer through us? Why does God make us suffer so that God can suffer with us? It's cruel, it's unloving, it's inhuman." And she's right. It's all of those things. I begin by saying this: near death experience, self realization, and enlightenment, they don't eliminate grief. They don't eliminate grief. They don't eliminate suffering. I stopped asking the question, why is there suffering? And asked the question, how do I escape suffering? I just said that realization and enlightenment don't eliminate grief. Well, then how can we get beyond suffering? How can we not grieve? Some were saying in this Facebook feed that we choose to grieve. They're just people who haven't ever really lost anybody. Even near death experiencers grieve. We grieve because we suffer the absence, like everybody, of the lost loved ones in our lives. And it's horrid, except for this one part. Once you have a self realization with a capital S, not little s, once you have an enlightenment, there's an understanding of the eternal nature inside ourselves and inside everyone around us and inside everything around us. And it's not belief. It is the experience of the namaste. The God in me bows to the God in you. We see God everywhere, all the time, in everything, even in our suffering, which is why they say in the New Testament, even praise the Lord in your suffering. How do you do that? How do you thank God for your suffering? And I don't just mean the pinprick in your fingertip. I mean the real, true suffering of loss. Jesus says, if the people were quiet, this is when he's going into Jerusalem that Palm Sunday, if the people were quiet, even the rocks would sing praises. He could see the divine presence inside of everything. And that's what realization is. That's what enlightenment is. They're a little different, the two of them, but that's not the subject for today. Here's a parable by Jesus that helps us understand how to escape Maya, samsara, and the illusion of separation. And that's what the problem is. It's the illusion of separation that is the root of suffering. And it's not the separation of one from another, which is part of grief, part of suffering. It's the separation of the self from the divine. It's the misunderstanding based in the reality of living that we are not also God. Little g, each of us inside. This is the parable, and I'm going to read it the way that I think that the church should have been reading it all the way along. This is his parable. How can Satan cast out Satan? Here's how. If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. The ego is what we're talking about. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he can't stand, but is coming to an end. No one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he may plunder the house. Assume this. Satan is your ego in this parable. Satan is Maya, the illusion, in this parable. Satan is the samsara in this parable. Satan is the universe, the manifested, the darkness pouring out from the light itself, the limited nature of the existence in which we are. It is not evil. It just is the way it is in order for us to exist in this world. In this parable, Satan isn't your enemy. It's you. It's your ego. It's my ego. It's the thing that fools us into believing that we are separate from the divine. It's our dual nature. It's the limited nature of the universe. The whole place is limited. The whole place is dual. The universe is made of light and darkness, love and suffering, sacred and Satan, in measure, including us. The Satan in this parable is our ego, and we bind our ego, and then we plunder the house. We divide our ego against itself. We use our ego against itself. Which is what we do in prayer, which is what we do in meditation. We use our mind to defeat our mind. We divide the mind and conquer the mind. We stop the story telling us how we are, and we listen instead for the inner quiet divine. So, how did Jesus stop his duality? He went into the wilderness by himself to pray. He went into the chamber of his heart, not into the temple where everybody else went to pray in Judaism. Oh, that's where he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be in the temple, but he went out into the wilderness and dove inside himself. And after his awakening at the River Jordan, before his enlightenment, before his um, experience on the mountaintop, where he turned into white light itself, he went into the desert to wrestle with the devil. Very similar to what Buddha did under the Bodhi tree. And for Jesus, Satan was personified. He was offered the world. For Buddha, he was offered the world. The difference was it was just the natural function of samsara, of illusion, of Maya, to behave in the way that tricks us into thinking that the world is all there is. In the Jesus tradition, it's personified in a being. So, how can Satan cast out Satan? You divide the kingdom against itself. How can Satan cast out Satan? Divide the kingdom against itself. Use your mind against itself. And the misperception of reality will fall. A kingdom divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. use the mind against itself, and duality comes to an end. And if a house is divided against itself, it will not be able to stand. And if Satan rises against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but the end is coming, says the parable. So back to my friend on Facebook, whose suffering was real. This ending of duality doesn't stop suffering, in that the world is a real place. What did Shakespeare write? If you prick me, do I not bleed? If you hurt me, do I not hurt? If my child dies, do I not grieve? If I lose a sister or a friend or a parent, don't I grieve? If I have an illness or an injury that causes me pain enough that consumes my life, don't I suffer? How can how can meditation, how can prayer bring an end to suffering? How does that work? It doesn't stop the suffering. So I'm going to use meditation as an example. When I had my heart attack, you know this story maybe, I didn't take any opiates for the long ride to the catheterization lab. I used meditation to focus my mind on my pain so I could rise above it. That's one way. But the deeper way is this: the deeper you go inside yourself, the more you open the door to self-realization. What is self-realization? It's the wrestling of the with the duality. Jesus in the desert with the Satan wrestles with reality. Which will he choose? We know which one he chooses. He ends up on the mountain top shortly thereafter in the transfiguration in an enlightened state of being. Does that end his suffering? It does not. Not in the way that you think it might. There's the saying, before enlightenment, wash the dishes. After enlightenment, wash the dishes. You still have to live in the world. The difference is this. Think of the time when he was before Pilate. At the end of this coming week, my kingdom is not of this world. You don't make me into this situation. I put myself into your hands. You have no power over me. Pilate's like, I can make you suffer. Jesus like, you have no power over me. Jesus suffers torture. And in the end, of course, he feels like he was abandoned, because that's a pretty serious thing going on there. Even an enlightened being can only endure so much suffering before darkness descends. But then at the very end, into your hands I commend my spirit. No end of belief, because it's not belief for Jesus, it's knowing. It's experiencing the divine directly in the world of suffering. And so when we have a self-realization, and when we choose heaven above all things, we then begin to see the divine inside ourselves, and we see it grow inside ourselves. And when we look in the eyes of other people, we see it in them, even in our enemies. We see it even in the rocks on the side of the road and in the trees and the forests. We begin to perceive the kingdom of heaven everywhere, all the time, even in the suffering. And this transcendent knowledge comes with a wisdom and understanding of the temporality of life, that you get to leave. Thank God it ends. Those who suffer grief are those who are still living. The dead don't suffer grief. There is no suffering on the other side. We suffer because part of love is selfishness. That's just the nature of it. And it's painful and horrid. That's why it's important to learn to swim before you get thrown in the ocean. To learn to find the love inside yourself before you really need it. To begin your practice now and follow it through the rest of your life. To strip away those little bits of yourself bit by bit until the divine finger of God. And in Luke, it says, in this similar passage where they put this story into a legend rather than a parable. He's talking to these people. He heals this. So Jesus, I'll set the scene in Luke. He's healing a mute person using his healing energy. Jesus is an energy healer in Luke. He uses his healing energy to give this mute man a voice. And the people around him say, he must be using the devil to cast out the devil. And Jesus is like, do your sons do that when they cast out the devil? Or don't they use God? Can a house stand against itself? Wouldn't it be better to say that I was touched by the finger of God, and the finger of God healed this man? That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the finger of God touching your heart. The finger of God in the action of the prayer life, where you use the mind against itself, where you use the Satan against itself, and allow room for the finger of God to touch you and enlighten you. How do I know this? You saw me swallow. Gulp. About to say something. In a mystical experience, I was taken into a heaven, carried by my angel. Far, far across the heavens, days' journeys, days of journeying, to the very edge of the creation, to the very edge of creation. And the closer I got, the stronger the light became. And the light was stronger than the darkness. A few years later, in another experience, I popped out the center of my forehead, out my third eye, and in an instant traveled the same distance, only closer, carried by my angel, enveloped in the divine intelligence that brought me there. And I could see the light itself pulsating and creating the darkness which is the universe, the limiting of the light itself, begetting all things that are. And the light was hidden inside the darkness. And the darkness isn't just our minds, it's all there is. If there is a Satan, it's the universe itself. It's the Maya. It's the illusion. And yet underneath it, inside it, is the light itself. This universe can't exist. This limited experience can't exist without the divine presence inside it and without the limitations of it. God suffers with us when we suffer. We don't suffer alone. And the deeper we go inside ourselves, when we see the divine light in our being, it doesn't end our suffering, it ends our attachment to our suffering. And that's a very big difference. The suffering itself continues, and I'll let you know I've had enough pain in my life, physical pain, to scramble my brain so that I was only pain. The brain continues to experience suffering, but the heart plunders heaven and brings the goods back with us. And the goods of heaven include the understanding that everything is made of light and love, even underneath our suffering. And you may ask the question like that woman did, and she's justified in asking the question. Why, if God is loving, would he take my son from me? There is an end. There is an end to living. And it's not just our children who are taken from us. It's life itself everywhere. It's all a temporary walk. We are walking through the world. The divine connection inside yourself makes that clear. When a self-realization comes, when realization comes, when you struggle against the Satan, personified, as in Jesus' life in the desert, or not personified, as in Buddha's life under the Bodhi tree, when you find this self-realization inside, and begin to perceive yourself as an eternally begotten child of the divine, you then see it in others, and it makes bearing the weight of suffering easier. It doesn't eliminate the pain, because the suffering itself is what cracks us open to the divine presence. It works together. In your suffering, if you aim at the divine, eventually you'll find what you're looking for. Use your mind against itself. Use the Satan, the darkness, which is not evil. It's just the universe. It's just the Maya. It's just the samsara of which we are made. Use the ego to defeat itself, to divide itself, to topple itself inside you. And then, once that ego is tied up, you get to plunder the riches of heaven and bring them with you into life, so that while you're suffering, you still have this strong attachment to the divine presence. This is what Jesus was teaching. This is what he was. This is how he lived. He was a divine realized being. He was heaven incarnate, seeing heaven incarnate in everything, everywhere. And though he went through ultimate torture, he still, in the end, commended his spirit to the divine. Home I go. Home I go. Go home now. That's what this parable's about. It teaches us how to begin to go home now. So, Not Church, it's here each week because of your support. And I want to thank Olga. I saw that come in. Because of your support through PayPal and Venmo and Patreon at peterpanagore.love. And through Super Chat today here. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kristen. Please give whatever you can to keep this going. doing the best I can over here, going and growing. I'm going to slide my screen over a little bit that way, which means I got to pull this camera a little bit closer so that I can see the super chat. I can see the chats. Um, you guys have been talking a lot this morning. I can see that. And I want to thank Sommer too. Thank you, Sommer. Um, but I'm not sure if you have any comments or questions. It's not Easter until you punched on an Easter egg. Opa! That's not until May 2nd this year, um, Orthodox Easter. So if you have a comment or a question, you might want to pop it into Super Chat. Otherwise, I'll have to scroll down. Great work. God bless from South Australia. Thank you. Thank you. Agaritsis, Heniosis, Panagore is the family's real name. So I'm guessing that you're Greek, my friend, down in Australia. Not that it, okay, so people are like, why do you care what your ethnicity is? Because it's freaking fun. Okay, that's why. Because there are cultural differences. Um, but so thank you from my friends in Australia. And you, hi, Rob. Good morning. I didn't say hi to everybody this morning. Hi, Michael. I receive this. The divine light within me doesn't end suffering, but it ends my connection to suffering. Thank you. Thank you, Michael Scott Gordon. It ends your connection to suffering. That's exactly what it does. It ends your attachment to it. I still suffer. My knees hurt a little bit today. I whine. I ran yesterday and my knees are bothering me. It doesn't stop that. It doesn't stop that. It stops my attachment to it. I know there's going to be a time when my knees stop suffering in time, but I also know in the now that I'm not my knees. They're part of me, but I'm not my knees. I'm going to repeat what you wrote. The divine light within me doesn't end suffering, but it ends my connection to suffering. That's how it works. That's how it works. Attachment. That's that. There's that word again. Attachment to outcome is usually so destructive. I'm learning to balance care with attachment, Wendy. Yeah, attachment to outcome. That is the trick of the prayer life. The last thing, so in Zen, the last thing that you have to abandon when you're seeking Satori is your desire for Satori. You have to give up your desire for it. You have to give up desire for the attachment to the end game because it's always about the now game. Sure, I definitely plan things and work my tail off to try to get to the end of things. Thank you, Michael. I definitely try to do that. I work my tail off, I strive, but will come what may. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. Whatever your will is what there's going to be. I try to assert my will, O Lord, but whatever your will is what will be. I do my best, but you make the choice of the decision of how it all turns out. And the less I attach to the end game, and the more I attach to the now game, the more the end game comes out as the divine wants it. Align my will with heaven. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Your will be done on my earth, in my earth, as it is in heaven. I'm moving my mic. I'm seeing all sorts of refocus going on over there. All right. Amen, Michael. Oh, I like the concept when we say Om, that we're calling out to home. We are calling out to home with Om. And here's a little confession for you guys. I chose not to practice Om back in 1980 because I was still hiding out in the Christian church and I couldn't be chanting Om. I couldn't be chanting Om. It was going to cause me trouble, so I didn't practice Om. But now I'm back to Om. Aum. Feeling the vibration. Not to the exclusion of the silence, because underneath the vibration of the body is the silence of the self that has no frequency that can be felt because it has no body that can be. You can't ultimately feel it with your body because your body isn't there when you're in spirit, when you're in the presence of the divine fully with no body. You have no body to hear it with. There's this incredible silence that is also music. I know that's contradictory. Can't help it. Meadowlark, thank you. My fear of Satan in heaven. Some NDE have seen it. Yeah, I went to hell, Ava. Okay? For sure, I went through a hell of my own making. I definitely did. But it was attached to myself. And when I was cleansed by the divine fire of purgative love, I was released from that false power into the divine presence. And I've seen demons too. Okay? So I know that stuff exists. But what I'm talking about here is the illusion of the self, the illusion of reality. The trick of Satan is to convince us that this reality is real. The trick of Satan is to convince us that the story we tell ourselves about ourselves is what we are. And it's not. You are the divine nature itself. Worry not about what you cannot control. Worry about the aim of your heart. Don't fear Satan or darkness or evil. Cling to light, cling to love, cling to joy, cling to peace, and all the rest of that stuff will take care of itself. That's why Jesus was always saying, seek heaven above all things. Above all things. And you'll find the divine. Worry not. Fear not, he said, more than he said anything else. Fear not. How do I let go of my desire for enlightenment when it's all my heart's desire? Sean, it's all my heart's desire too. Keep aiming at it. It will release itself. That is the beauty of it. Keep aiming at it, because when enlightenment actually comes, you won't even be present for it. When enlightenment actually comes, you cannot be present for it. It is so overwhelming and infilling that it is the obliteration of the self. You can't fake the obliteration of yourself. You can only continue to desire the oneness of being and wait for the divine finger of God to touch your heart with an explosion of illumination. And in the explosion of illumination, which is different than self-realization, these are different things. Enlightenment is a very different thing. It is the elimination of the duality itself, completely and utterly self-identified with the light itself, where there is no more smaller self, only there is the divine presence. So don't worry about it, Sean. Don't worry about it. Keep aiming at the oneness. Keep the desire going. Stoke that fire. Guard that fire. Keep throwing sticks on that fire. Build that fire inside yourself, and it will go into a supernova on its own. It'll, the divine self, come and touch you. Maybe not in this life, maybe in the next. Maybe it takes many soul lives. Maybe. It happened to me. I didn't cause it. And I don't just mean in my NDE. I mean in my desire and the pursuit of the divine being itself. There was that day on the highway where the light obliterated me from the interior, and I had nothing to do with it. All I did was pursue it. Keep pursuing it, Sean. The ego obliteration comes on its own. You're welcome, Meadowlark. Silence is also the music. Love it. It is. That it totally is. It totally is. You're welcome, Ava. Thank you, Illuminated Castle. David, God's source is love. The kingdom of source is love. To enter the divine kingdom, we choose love. All sin is not knowing that. Oh, okay. All sin is not knowing that all is love. That, David, I'm going to read this again. This is it. This is a summary. God's source is love. The kingdom of source is love. To enter the kingdom, we choose love. Over and over and over again, we choose love. That's what a prayer life is. In the practical part of living, you choose love in your life. You choose it in your repetition, in your prayer, in your heart. And all sin is not knowing that all is love. Sin is not knowing that all is love. That is sin, not knowing that all is love. This is what Jesus was aiming at all the friggin' time. Again, seek heaven above all things. Love your neighbor as yourself and love God above all things. That is the summary of the law. That is it. Tell that story, says Illuminated Castle, about the traffic accident. I may, if we have a few minutes here. Am I afraid of love? Yeah. Afraid of the loss of ego. That's what's the ego tells us to fear its loss. The ego says, the Satan says to us, I am all there is. I am all there is. Be afraid if you lose me. Love says, I am all there is. Be with me and love me, and I will give you everything. All right, so I have a few minutes, and I'll tell very briefly what happened to me on the side of the highway. So, where do I begin to make it short? Because we don't have a lot of time. Car wreck. In divinity school. It's my last year of divinity school at Yale. I'm coming back from a retreat with a friend of mine where we were running the retreat. He was running it. I was helping. It was for kids, junior high. And there's a car accident. Car flips over. I scream. I have him stop the car. I get out because I was a first responder. I go to the scene, sparing all the details. Old man on the ground, unconscious. I palpate him. I feel nothing broken. I get to his belly, his beer belly, his chubby beer belly, his like stone. Feels like stone. It should be soft as a beer belly, jiggly jiggly. Feels like rock. I think to myself, internal bleeding. This guy's bleeding out on the inside. I don't know this. I can't see this. But my training tells me when you touch a chubby belly that should be jiggly and it feels like stone, it means it's filling up with blood. Nothing I can do for the poor fellow. I can't for fully treat him for shock. Can't raise his legs. Keep blood to his heart. Raise his legs. Gonna rush blood to his belly. He'll bleed out faster. Cover him with a blanket. Yeah, we could coats. I think we used. I kneel. I have nothing else that I can do. I put one hand over his third eye, about an inch away. My other hand over his solar plexus, about an inch away. I drop into my meditation. chanting Jesus. And as soon as I begin to chant, it's like an explosion inside me. I can't tell whether it comes from the top or the bottom or the inside. It's all three at once. And there is a flash of lightning. And I say this, okay? I've also been hit by lightning. It's like that, only the lightning that hit me was on the outside. This lightning was on the inside of me. And when it exploded inside of me, it eliminated all of me. I was not present anymore. I wasn't there. I was only light itself. It was painful and pleasurable, all consuming, illuminating, eliminating, overwhelming. And it felt like it pulsed through me, through my hands, and it would flash and end flash, and I'd be back, locked in my position, and flash, and I would vanish on my inside, filled with divine light, and it would pulse through me and end, and I'd awaken and pulse through me. I would vanish on my interior. My sense of self was gone, and I was illuminated in the divine presence. We're running out of time here, so I'll cut to the chase. It all ended. The ambulance came. We backboarded him. Off he went. And on the way home, all of his pain came inside of me. And I felt like I was on fire, like there was a burning fire inside of me. All of his pain roiling inside of me. And as I closed my eyes, I was rocketing across heaven toward the light. And this whole thing lasted 3 days. An illuminated castle, I'd love to finish it today, but I can't. It's way too long. But it is going to be in my next book, which I am diligently working on. And I'll tell it another time. Okay? I promise. Thank you, Ava. Appreciate that. Meadowlark, Michael, and everybody who I already thanked. It's 10:53. I'm going to try to get a couple of minutes here before Mystic Tea Salon, where you can find the link at peterpanagore.love. I'm looking up in the sky trying to think where it is. Where is that link? It's under the tab program. peterpanagore.love. See you at Mystic Tea Salon this week. Peace and love to you all. You're welcome, Kristen. Thanks for coming this morning. Thanks for liking the video. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for all your gifts that keep this thing going. I appreciate it. Thank you, Leah. Super appreciate this. The power of prayer and meditation is the opening of oneself to illumination. That's what it does. It just does this. All you have to do is get out of the way. The only thing between you and God is you. The only thing between you and God is your ego. The only thing between you and God is your Satan. The thing that stands in your way is us. By going repeatedly into the divine self, you open yourself up to the divine presence, and you carve away a bigger and bigger space inside yourself for the illumination to come. So just to give you a little review here, calling, awakening, realization, illumination, enlightenment. Jesus, calling, goes to the river, meets with John, who he considers a teacher, gets baptized. Dove falls down on his head. This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. Goes out into the desert, wrestles with Satan, self-realization, chooses heaven above all things, climbs the mountain, has transfiguration, his clothes turn as white as snow. It's illumination, it's enlightenment. Goes about the rest of his life, using his life as an example of a spiritual life to imitate. That's my summary. You're welcome, Beth. Thanks, MG and Rob. Peace to you all, my friends. Namaste. Peace to you all. I'll see you soon. Love and peace, everybody.